You're listening to the 49 Carats.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Wednesday, October 9th, a little special Wednesday episode. Didn't do my usual show with Rob on Wednesday. Instead, doing my preview show with KP of Niners Nation because we got a Thursday night football game tomorrow where the 49ers and the Seahawks, honestly, are hoping to bounce back and be first place in the NFC West. So, KP, how you doing today, man?
Going from Rob to me, talk about an upgrade. Let's go.
I won't tell him you said that.
I will. No, I'm doing well. It's I think I'm ready to watch them play again, just like them, right? Kind of shake off what we just saw. So it should be a fun game. It usually is.
Usually is, yes. George Kittle talking about just the environment and how playing in Seattle is one of his favorite places to play. Wouldn't be my choice personally of places to watch the 49ers play because I just get so stressed out. Just the trauma of the Pete Carroll years. But it should be a good one, good atmosphere and all that. But let's look at some of the 49ers injuries in this one. And by the way, no Desi on the show today. Usually she joins us for these injury updates and to talk about them, but she had to evacuate. As you guys know or might know, she lives in Tampa, so she had to evacuate because of the hurricane. She is safe though, in a different city, so she is good, and hopefully her home and the homes of everyone else in that area are okay after that. But yeah, we miss you, Des. All right, so let's look at the 49ers injury game status for this game. You got a few players out. So, 4 players. Jordan Elliott, Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles once again. Hufanga, who's also placed on IR, and Jake Booty, who's going to be missing a few weeks. He didn't go on IR, so I wonder if the 49ers maybe decided ultimately to not place him on IR. But, yeah, he's going to be out a couple weeks with that ankle. So, from the out names, Jordan Elliott, I think, is a big one because defensive line, the interior of that defensive line is really getting thin, right? Like, so they got to make a decision on who they bring up from the practice squad this week. They have T.Y. McGill. They have Evan Anderson, the UDFA rookie, who I like. I think both of those players would be solid, but, obviously not top of the line for who you would rather have out there. So how do you think that impacts this game for the 49ers?
Yeah, well, it will be interesting because obviously, no Gross Matos, so they just keep getting hit by the injury bug. And we've seen Sorensen really like to use these 5-man defensive line fronts. So maybe he just gets more aggressive and continues to blitz, continues to just get more pressure. We know that's not really a strength on Geno Smith, but I mean, it's definitely going to take a toll. There's no way around it, right? Yet at some point, attrition is going to catch up to you, and unfortunately, it seems like that's happening earlier than they wanted it to.
Yeah, so we'll definitely make things interesting for the 49ers. At the very least, like, we're not expecting it to be 100 degrees like it was on Sunday, so that might mean they don't need to rotate quite as much as they did probably this past weekend, but still important. And Mooney Ward, who's been dealing with a knee injury now for the last couple weeks, he's questionable for this game. But I want to ask you, KP, do you feel like we've seen a version of Mooney Ward that's been limited by this knee injury? Because I think we know, like, he doesn't quite look like himself or what we've come to know him as.
I don't think it's close. Last week was just not 7. Like, that was not who I'm used to seeing. So there were a couple plays where, like, the Cardinals ran a deep intermediate an intermediate crossing route, and he, like, was jogging across. It was wild to watch. Most of the times, like, when they play defense, Ward is usually one of the first people to, like, be aggressive, come up and make a tackle. He had 0 tackles against the Rams, and that just tells me, like, he's not trusting whatever is going on in his body. Like, he's not confident. There was another play where Jair Brown was telling him, hey, like guard this person. Like they were actively communicating before the ball was snapped, and he ran with the wrong person. So it's something's off. It was, I don't want to say like it was his worst game, but like it was clearly, I don't want to say mentally checked out either because I don't know what's going on with him, but like something was for sure off. And I don't know if it was just him and a couple other players conserving energy because they have a quick turnaround, because that does matter, but it was not right. And again, like if there was ever a time to get right, it's him against DK Metcalf, because he owns DK Metcalf, always has. And like he's going to be psyched up for this matchup. Maybe they let him travel with him, and maybe that'll get him locked in more, like locked in the way that he needs to be. But yeah, it's been really interesting to watch because again, like he's one of their best players, and they need him to be one of their best players. Last year he was a freaking All-Pro, and he deserved it, and he earned it. He's very good. Just not seeing that so far this year.
Yeah, and this is definitely a challenging matchup, one that he has dominated in the past, as we've mentioned. But if he's a little limited by that injury, I don't know. Like it makes me a little hesitant. But he's going to give it a go in this game. I could say like there's probably no one right now that is more thankful that the 49ers are going to be having a mini bye than Mooney Ward after this. So let's take a look at Seattle's set of injuries, because they have quite a bit as well, and some really important ones. So their defensive tackle, Byron Murphy, is going to be out for this one. Tariq Woolen, their starting corner, one of their better starting corners, out. Uchenna Nwosu also going to be out in this game. He's probably headed to IR for them. As far as the questionables go, Derek Hall and Boy Mafe, pair of their edge rushers. I think it's huge that Mafe is going to be playing in this game because he's been a big contributor for them. So he's going to give it a go. And then Julian Love, questionable. Or I shouldn't say that he's going to give it a go, but he's questionable. So I tend to think leaning towards playing. But I guess we'll see shortly before the game starts. But when you look at these injuries for the Seahawks side, I mean, there's no reason that the 49ers offense can't capitalize this.
Yeah,
right?
Like they should hum in this matchup. Like this is a very good get right spot for the 49ers offense. We've talked about the Patriots being a get right spot for the defense. I think this is the side of the ball where they can really take advantage. If you watch the Lions game, I think I'm not using what we saw against the Giants because the Seahawks did not take the Giants seriously. Like you could tell just by the way that they played them. Like they were pressing, they were playing cover zero. They were just basically playing them like a little league. Like you're not expecting them to do anything. And sure enough, it backfired on them. But Nwosu, Hall, Mafe, like those are their guys who they rely on rushing the passer. So even if Hall and Mafe are not 100%, like that is a big deal. Love is their safety / nickel. Like he's basically Lenore of their defense. Like he does a lot for them and they ask a lot of him. So he has a hamstring injury. So if he can't go, like that's big too. If he's limited, that's a guy that you might want to test down the field. You want to get him running laterally and you're running across the field. So all these really stand out. Murphy is the freaking first round pick that they're expecting on helping. So yeah, every person on this list, like Woolen hasn't really been as good as he was his rookie year, but he's still like they're expecting him to contribute. So we're just going down the depth chart. And once you get past the first depth of the Seahawks, I think you really start to see the struggles that they have. But yeah, all of those players are like impactful in their own way, I would say.
Yeah, and I know Seahawks fans are definitely nervous about all the defensive players that they're missing right now, especially going into this game against a division rival. Like, I can't blame them. So, yeah, definitely needs to be a game that the 49ers take advantage of that in. All right, let's take a quick look at the Seahawks offense before we get into some not so favorable matchups in this game. So, obviously, wide receivers, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, you know, he's on the back end of his career here. You know, I wouldn't call him washed, but, you know, definitely not the same guy he used to be. Jackson Smith and Jigma, he's their slot receiver. He's the young guy, and they're involving him more and more. Noah Fant, their tight end, and Geno Smith, who has been slinging it lately. So we'll talk about that more in a bit. And then their running back, Ken Walker, who missed a couple games but returned this past week against the Giants. And looked good. Also, shout out Lake and Tomlinson, man. Now with the now with the Seahawks,
By
he
the
is
way, great
their
human, super nice, like really good dude.
yeah. He's their left guard, so I'm sure it'll be nice to get a little reunion there with him. And yeah, I mean their offensive line, I think for the most part, it looked like the right side maybe struggles a little bit more than the left. Um, but like I said, they're passing a lot, so that kind of changes the dynamic of what the Seahawks offensive line is kind of working against, because they've been one dimensional. But one thing I want to talk about is the not so favorable. Should we expect the unexpected? Because Nick Bosa spoke about this week after the game, and he said, quote, "In all our losses, the preparation we've had has been great, but teams are playing us different and doing things differently, and we need to adjust a little better. They're just showing different looks and what we were looking at on tape. We've got to adjust," end quote. Now, KP, a lot of people took this quote and ran with the fact that, oh, he's dissing Nick Sorensen, he's throwing him under the bus. I think the bigger takeaway, at least for me when I read this, was what I've kind of feared, and I've mentioned before on the offensive side for the 49ers, that teams kind of know what the 49ers want to do offensively. Now it seems on the other side of the ball, on the defensive side, teams know what the 49ers want to do, and they're going out of their own tendencies in order to match up better to what the 49ers struggle with, right? So I think we saw that against Arizona. I think we've seen that in other times this season. So that's an interesting one for me, especially going into this week, knowing that Seattle's been passing a lot, but what if they switch it up on the 49ers?
Yeah, first of all, I love Bosa just being blunt, right? Just telling us. Like, and I didn't take it as like throwing shade either. I think he's just telling us exactly what's happening, right? Like, we come into the game ready. We come into the game with a great plan. And then they make adjustments, but we don't. He's basically telling the coaches, hey, like, we need to make adjustments. I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said. I don't think he was like overly harsh or anything. I'm sure he feels that they can all play better too. He just didn't get a chance to say it. I don't know if Seattle really steers away from what they do. So they brought in Grubbs. I forgot what his name is. Ryan Grubbs, maybe is his name. The Washington coordinator. If you watch Washington college football last year, like, it was Penix. They were throwing the ball all over the yard, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're leaning into Geno, which is what you do. Geno's a great player. The problem is, though, they can't really block. And when you're going to pass the ball as often as they do, there you go. Look at that pass rate. That is insane how often they throw the ball, which, I mean, you really are leaning into Geno. So I don't know if that's what you want to do against the 49ers. I know that, some people will just think about the last thing that they saw, and that was Kyler throwing a fadeaway pass and completing a fourth down. So thinking, hey, the 49ers passing or their defense struggles, and they really don't. They've done a good job overall. It's just, again, at the worst possible times, right? 4th and 10, you can't get off the field. 3rd and 7, you can't get off the field. But like on a down-to-down basis, they've actually done a really good job. And honestly, they've done a good job at limiting explosive plays. But this is where, like, Seattle not having their right tackle should come into play. Like, this is where even like a Laken Tomlinson, like, he's not who he was when he was with the 49ers. Like, there's a reason he's bounced around the league the last couple of years. So, like, the 49ers should control the line of scrimmage. Maybe not as dominant as it did against the Patriots, but, like, this is a matchup where they have to win. And if they don't, Geno's just going to take advantage because he had, like I said, he's been very good. He can throw the ball all over wherever it needs to be. He's very accurate. That's a strong arm. I would expect Sorensen to do a lot of what he's done, and that just continues to blitz Campbell and kind of get him out of the way. And I would imagine Fred continues to patrol the middle of the field. Where I do think the adjustments do come is letting Ward, like, he hasn't traveled with anybody this year, and like, that's why you're paying him. So let him do that. He's very good. Let him be that person. So maybe those are the adjustments. I don't think there's going to be anything else outside of that. They don't really have to do much else. But we don't know if Mooney's going to play, right? He's on the injury report. He's questionable with a knee injury, and that popped up kind of out of nowhere. Kyle Shanahan said he just got a bruise on his knee from the game. So if that is the case, and if, on a short week, you don't want to risk it. And, you want to give him that little mini bye, the extra rest. It means we're going to see Renardo Green. And that means you would think that an experienced offensive coordinator, an experienced offense would pick on the rookie, right? So maybe we'll see an uptick in targets for DK Metcalf. But I think Seattle does have some very good wide receivers, and this will be the best group of wide receivers. Obviously, they face Justin Jefferson, but the Seahawks passing offense and passing weapons are very good, but their line makes it very difficult for them to get over. So, Nick Bosa is coming off a game where he really didn't do anything. Usually those are he bounces back after those kind of games.
Yeah, and for the audio listeners who can't see what's on the screen, I'm going to read it out for you. So we would expect this that Seattle would be pass heavy in this game like they have been this season. They currently lead the league in pass play rate at 67.4%, and they've thrown 9% over expectation. And Geno Smith, he's kind of been cooking. He leads the league in dropbacks, 45 a game. That's pretty crazy. He leads the league in completed passes, yards per game, 28.6 and 293.2 respectively. He leads the league in total passing yards, 1,466 after 5 weeks. So this is what we're expecting. And I think if if Seattle sticks to that, I think that plays well into the 49ers' hands, because if you can make a team, you always want to make a team one-dimensional. If a team is already one-dimensional going into the game and they're cool with that, then I feel like the 49ers can definitely plan for that and just kind of pin their ears back and go after Geno Smith as much as they can. But of course, I think what we're worrying about is a bit of a change of direction for Seattle and doing something that is, different than their tendency right now in order to beat the 49ers. But I will say, I think what you're saying is true. The corners have been, Ward's been struggling, but Lenore's been awesome. If Ward is not limited by the injury, I feel good about him, matching up against Metcalf again. I think I'm a little worried about Isaac Yiadom. He's been a heavy target for opponents so far. And you got, like I said, Smith and Jigba, who's been playing 82% of his snaps from the slot. So I think it's a really good matchup for him this week, and one that they're probably going to target. The 49ers have allowed they're 24 in yards allowed per attempt with 7.4 and 23rd in touchdown rate to passers. So there is a world where the 49ers could struggle here against, the Seattle's pass attack. But again, if they're one-dimensional, I think it makes it a little bit easier to kind of know what to expect and attack that.
Yeah, and this is where Malik Mustafa and Jair Brown come into play, because they're going to be needed. You have to expect that, Geno, if you just watch Seattle play, he likes to go to underneath to his tight end quick, if he's not protected. So having a guy to match up with Noah Fant, right? That's her Noah Fant, who I think he's a great fit for what they do on offense. But you would think Fred Warner kind of drops back and tries to take away the middle, but the safeties are going to have to do work, and that probably comes on the early downs. I think Jair Brown doesn't get enough credit for what he's done against the run this year, but they're going to be put into some difficult situations one-on-one against the pass. And with how accurate Geno is, it will for sure be tough for those two. So if they can just limit the big plays, right? If they get a catch, make the tackle, whatever, but you can't let them get going after the catch. That's for sure.
So what would be the unexpected in this game is if, Seattle does decide to run the ball more in this one, because, hey, we've seen how the 49ers have at times struggled against defending the run. The last thing we saw was James Conner, bulldozing his way through the 49ers defense late in the fourth quarter against Arizona. So, I don't think it's that crazy of an idea to think hey, maybe Ryan Grubb, Seahawks offensive coordinator, does lean into the run a little bit more in this game. In fact, after their game against the Giants, Ryan Grubb said, quote, "We have to get the ball to Ken Walker more." And so when you think about that, that can make things interesting. If Seattle is a little more balanced or maybe just not as pass heavy as they have been, Ken Walker, of course, can hurt you. He has 5.5 yards per carry this season. That's 10th in the league. He has 4 rushing touchdowns. Mind you, he missed 2 games this season, so that's pretty good. That's 8th most in the league, 4 rushing touchdowns. And then his success rate at 48.6% is 10th in the league as well. So it's not that like they're passing because their run game doesn't work. Like Ken Walker can be efficient. So I don't know.
He's very
Maybe
explosive too, really fast. Can make you miss, can make you look silly. They have had trouble tackling these better backs, which like Connor is a good example. Connor made some very nice plays. So I would be worried about 1st and 10 turning into 2nd and 6. Turning into 3rd and 2, and if any offense lives in like 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, they're gonna have a good day. But they're gonna have to stop him on early downs, which again comes back to the safeties making plays against the run and the defensive line just controlling the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and hopefully, like we've seen in the past, like we saw against the Patriots. I know this isn't the Patriots, but the defensive line and some of those reserved guys looked great in that game. So if they can kind of rise to the occasion again against this Seahawks team in their run game, I'd feel better about that matchup as well. Let's take a look at the Seahawks defense, and let me make this quick edit. All right, so we've got Devin Witherspoon, who's going to be their best corner on the field because, as we mentioned, Tariq Woolen's going to be out in this game. Now, I was trying to see like who might the Seahawks start in Woolen's place. At least PFF has Nehemiah Pritchett on there right now, and I've seen other people mention Artie Burns as an option. So TBD, we'll have to see, but obviously not going to be as good as Tariq Woolen has been. They also have Trey Brown on the other side. Julian Love, as we mentioned, he's questionable in this game. And so I think their strength is in their defensive line, right? Mafe is questionable in this game as well. If he gives it a go, I think that's definitely a little concerning. Leonard Williams has had phenomenal games against the 49ers last season, both when he was with the Giants and then after the trade when he went to Seattle. He had monstrous games. So I'd be concerned about him. And then Derek Hall, too, who is questionable. So they might not be too badly off on the defensive line, but obviously corner with Woolen out could be a concern for them.
Yeah, so no Woolen means Pritchard. That's who came in for them last week, and I would assume, that's who it's going to be this time as well. Again, they have so many advantages on the side of the ball that it would be frustrating to watch and them come away with like 17 points in this game. Like, there's no reason for the 49ers to come away with like a 30-piece in this game, and I'm serious. So Dotson on the screen, slow as dirt. Jenkins, slow as dirt. Julian Love walks down to the slot sometimes. Him and Witherspoon, like, they can cover. There's no doubt about that. But I think when you get to running the 49ers' actual passing concepts, like, that's where they can really, really take advantage of this team. So if you just think about what the 49ers want to do, they want to throw the ball in between the numbers at the intermediate level. Like, Brock Purdy has 32% of his passes. That's where he throws the ball. That is the most in the NFL by about 4 percentage points. The Seahawks, they are 30th in EPA per pass against passes between the numbers when targeted between 8 and 23 yards. The 49ers are first in success rate and total EPA when targeting that same area of the field. It is strength, like what they do the best, versus absolutely not. And again, if you kind of watch what the Seattle does, like, their linebackers, they run themselves out of plays, like, a lot. They are a little too aggressive, in my opinion. They basically they run into the hole before they should, and it allows for cutbacks, which is going to be great for Mason, but it also allows for like huge throwing windows over the middle of the field. So I think this is a George Kittle game. If you remember, George Kittle had a couple of drops this past game. He wasn't George Kittle. I think this is a great opportunity for Kittle to bounce back. It's going to be a good breakthrough game for Brock Purdy. I don't think we're going to have to worry about him, holding the ball and scrambling around a bunch. I don't think that's what Seattle does. So I don't want to – people are referencing like what the Ravens did last year to the 49ers. Mike McDonald does not have those same players in this game.
Right.
So like it's not fair for either, for whether it's the Ravens, whether it's the Seahawks, whether it's McDonald. So like there are a lot of favorable advantages for the 49ers. And again, I expect them to really get Kittle going. And I would not be surprised if it's if it's a big game for Mason as well.
Yeah, so definitely expecting a bounce back from Brock Purdy in this one. And I think there were opportunities for him to have a good game against Arizona as well. And I don't think it was like his worst game, but definitely maybe got a little too carried away with, escaping the pocket in that one. And so I would expect that he kind of reels that in a little bit in this one and kind of sticks to the script a little more. And so against Seattle, he's had some really solid games. He's 4-0 in starts against them. He's thrown multiple touchdowns in 3 of those 4 games. And for what, like KP was mentioning in Seattle's defense, right? The quarterbacks they've faced so far this season, Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, Skylar Thompson, Jared Goff, Daniel Jones.
Who was 18 for 18, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Jared Goff, 18 of 18 in that game, and the Lions just went absolutely nuts in that one. It was score crazy, but yeah, I don't think it's any coincidence, right, that against Goff and maybe even against Jones, like they struggled, right? When you look at the quarterbacks they had faced the previous 3 weeks. So Brock Purdy having the success that he has had against Seattle, and then also the fact that he has this offense that should be cooking, right? Like we have all these talented players, so I see no reason why Brock Purdy shouldn't be able to put together a good performance. And you talked about George Kittle. I didn't do a slide for George Kittle. I was like contemplating whether or not I should, but I do agree with you. I think this is going to be a George Kittle game because, last week and in the last couple of weeks, he's been pretty involved. And I like that. Like last week, 8 of 12 targets, 64 yards, touchdown. I know he was targeted a second time in the red zone as well. That's his 3rd straight game with a touchdown. So, I love the fact that the 49ers are trying to involve him in the red zone. I know they've had issues there, but I think that's a good place to start. Wanting to involve someone who's a matchup problem, especially in the red zone. I like that. And I think it's going to pay some dividends. And hopefully, again, in this game, he's getting the target on nearly 25% of his routes. That's his highest that he's had with Purdy. So again, it just speaks to that involvement. And then as far as Seattle defense goes, defending against tight ends, they've allowed 7.7 yards per target. That's 23rd to tight ends. And Hunter Henry had 109 yards. Sam Laporta had 53. I have Sam Laporta on my fantasy team. That's not a crazy stat line for him, but
he could have had a lot more, by the way. If watching that game, because I remember one of my friends was rooting hard for Laporta in that game. They used old friend Tim Patrick in that game a couple times, and he basically ate away from some of Laporta's plays. He had a couple big plays himself. He had 2 receptions for 52 yards on exactly the same plays they would have called for Laporta. So that number is a bit skewed. I think it could have been even higher.
Yeah, so I definitely, like I said, continue to think that George Kittle is going to remain involved, and I think that's going to be a huge target for Brock in this one. And Corey, not a fan of me declaring this a bounce back game for Purdy because I did it last week too, right? And like I said, it should have been, but I think he was just a little maybe not as disciplined as he was in prior games and in past games. But I think he's, like I said, he's gonna reel it in is what I'm expecting in this one. And like we mentioned, Seattle has so many injuries, he has to capitalize on it. So my declaration is more so it's not a declaration, it's just what I expect to happen based on the matchup. That's what we do in these preview shows. And so the next one I want to talk about is the 49ers receivers, because I think there's an opportunity here for them as well. In week 4 and week 5, Seahawks allowed in week 4 7 catches, 160 yards, and a touchdown to the Detroit receivers. Week 5 against the Giants, 10 catches, 137 yards, and 2 touchdowns to them. Keep in mind, Malik Neighbors didn't even play. Like, could you imagine how much worse it could have been if he did? Now, Brandon Ayuk, say what you want about how he started the season. Week 5, was kind of his coming out party against Arizona. 8 catches, 147 yards. Definitely feel like it could have been even more for him in that one. He had 91 yards in the first half alone in that game. But I'm definitely expecting him, especially with Tariq Woolen being out, to get some favorable looks in this one.
Yeah, and I would imagine Witherspoon just stays in the slot. He's a very good player. So he'll probably be matched up on like the Juwan Jennings and maybe Deebo Samuel when he comes into the slot. But on the outside, if we're looking at Pritchett guarding Ayuk, Pritchett is a 5th rounder. He's tall, lanky, slender. He's a 5th rounder for a reason, is the easiest way to put it. And if you just go on the other side, like you said, like with Witherspoon going in the slot, that means Ayuk is going to be guarded against backups on both sides, wherever he is outside of the numbers. So again, like there's no real reason to think that he will not come away with another promising game. I'm not going to say he's going to have 147 yards, but like he's constantly running these in-breaking routes. The players guarding him have not really had a player of his caliber that they've guarded this season. Like if you look at what they did against the Lions, Jameson Williams, like he had a 70-yarder in there. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he was consistently converting just underneath stuff into first down. So again, I think if the 49ers, like this is a game where I actually am interested to see if there's an uptick in play action, because that is what Seattle has struggled against, especially in that Lions game. The 49ers, for whatever reason, they've steered away from that. They actually have one of the lowest play action rates in the NFL this year, which is, I don't want to say a surprise. If anything, it's probably a compliment to how the coaching staff feels about Purdy and the weapons. But I wonder if they go back to that route this game, right? We talk about the space that's created behind the Seahawks linebackers when they're running out of place, when they're in the spots that are not supposed to be. So I could see seeing more, hey, you're going to lean on Mason, who only had 14 carries last week. We kind of talked about he's going to be fresh this week. So maybe he gets 20, 25, and that leads to more play action, and that leads to more Deebo and Ayuk running freely over the middle and getting a chance to run after the catch, which is what Detroit was able to do. And I think that's where the 49ers can really make the Seahawks hurt, because outside of Witherspoon and maybe Love, they're slow and not good tacklers, is the easiest way to put it.
You mentioned Jameson Williams for the Detroit Lions. He's a speedster. He's having a breakout year. The 49ers have a speedster in Jacob Cowing that they haven't really used yet. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that maybe Kyle Shanahan feeling like he's just not ready yet. And then also last week he was out with the shoulder injury. Do you think at any point, like, we're going to see some just like go routes out there for Jacob Cowing, or just, I don't know, any opportunity for him to play a few snaps, stretch the field, see what could happen?
Probably not before the bye. I think Kyle's been pretty adamant about that. I think he wants somebody who can block. And then the one thing Ronnie Bell can do is, he can hold up as a blocker. So like when Ronnie Bell has been playing, at least last week anyway, he's just been running dummy routes. He's been that guy running the deep route. If I'm at defense, I don't pay any attention to that. I let him run. Like, I dare you to throw it to him, especially after what we've seen. So no, which kind of sucks for Cowing, because it's nothing that he can control, right? It's basically just his size and stature. Maybe like what it'll probably take is for him to have a good punt return, right? For him to show, hey, like, look what I can do when the ball is in my hands. Let me get a chance on offense. But at the same time, like, they have Ayuk, they have Deebo, they have Jennings, they have Kittle, they have Mason, who honestly they should probably use more as a receiver. So like it's not really talking down on Cowing. It's more of like, look who else is on the roster.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Definitely, just selfishly, I do want to see more of him. But yeah, they have plenty of talent already on the field. So Now, one guy in this receiver room that I've for the last 2 weeks has been a little quiet is Deebo Samuel, and I know he came back from his calf injury, right, which he missed a game or 2 games. Was it 2 games or 3? I think it was just 2.
2, yeah.
Yeah, 2. He missed 2 games with. He came back, and in the last 2 games since that, he's had 8 targets and 69 yards between 2 games. So when you think about what he was getting prior to that, I think he had targets of 9 in week 1 and 10 in week 2. So a huge drop off in his targets. And I don't know. Maybe it gives me the sense that the 49ers knew like he wasn't coming back 100% probably from that calf, and is just want to have him out there, but obviously don't want to overuse him, or maybe he doesn't even look like the same guy right now since that calf injury. So what do you think about Deebo, and does he need that mini bye too before we see him kind of return to form?
Yeah, so he struggled against the Cardinals to get open, like not statistically speaking, but if you just like watch him and only him, he wasn't really separating. He was the Cardinals covered him very well. So the more that I watched them play outside of the Vikings game, the Vikings played a ton of zone, so it's easier to get open. When teams play man coverage, it's Ayuk and it's Jennings and it's Kittle, and then it's Deebo in the pecking order of like who I would trust to get open. Obviously, you can put Kittle up there, but like wide receiver wise, I'd say it is Ayuk and Jennings, and then I would say there's a little bit of a gap before you get to Deebo. So I think the 49ers kind of understood that coming in. Like during training camp, his route tree was a lot more limited than what it was in years past. And again, like his main involvement this year has been against teams in zone. Or last week, his longest reception was on a screen in the red zone. So,
which he looked good on.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah. All right. So Salty Uncle Salty has this comment. Garendo had more touches than Deebo last week. That's just wrong. Well, on the screen, I mean, you guys can see Deebo rushing this season. He's had 15 carries, 36 rushing yards. That's definitely nothing to write home about. I mean, if he was this inefficient, I wouldn't want him running too much either. Like we said, like if the 49ers know he's not 100%, then I'm fine with them giving Garendo those opportunities instead. And why not? Because like you need to kind of build up Garendo, and you want Garendo to have more carries, I think, to get more comfortable, and also to help spell Jordan Mason, because you don't want to run Mason into the ground either. And you also don't want to run Deebo into the ground by giving him more carries than he needs to. He's not a running back. So I think I understand it now. Like Deebo just hasn't been the same guy on the ground. It almost looks like defenses have seen it all before, and they know how to stop it. So I think that's part of the reason we're not seeing it like we have in years past.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think, again, it goes back to being able to get open. And I think part of the usage last week was like, just like we talked about, like they're going to have to split a lot of the Mason Deebo touches because of what they have tomorrow. So you don't want to overload, because with the mini bye, now you can kind of go out of your way and put a lot on these guys' plates. So
now Deebo has had some really good games against Seattle in the past. He has lines of 6, 133, 1 touchdown, 7 catches, 79 yards, 7 catches, 149 yards, 1 touchdown. That's just through the air in those games. So yeah, that's with Purdy under center the last 3 times. So he's had some good games. So maybe this is a bounce back for Deebo as well. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But earlier, we were mentioning Jordan Mason, and I do think he has an opportunity here too. He's looked good in pretty much every game, right? We know he's been efficient even against those stacked boxes. So there really isn't much that teams can do to stop him. Now, of course, he has to hold on to the football. I think we know that. I think probably 1 week removed, or even less than a week removed from, his fumble on Sunday, he's going to be holding on to that ball. But I think there's an opportunity here, because when you look at who the Seahawks have faced on the ground, like against Denver and Miami, they did pretty well. Mind you, against Miami, it was Skylar Thompson under center. So that's why, like, I think they kind of expected that Miami was going to run the football. And so they limited them to just 59 yards on 17 carries. But against New England, they allowed 33 carries for 179 yards. Against Detroit, 26 carries for 118 yards. And the Giants last week, 22 carries, 133 yards. And David Singletary, their starter, wasn't even playing. It was Tyrone Tracy for much of that. So I think,
was very good
like,
in that
he's
game.
Nice. He's real nice.
He looked really good in that game.
I do like him, but yeah, so I think there's a good opportunity here for Jordan Mason to get going. And if the 49ers want to run the ball a little more than maybe they have been, I think this is a good game to do it too.
So in this little mini series, Christian McCaffrey has absolutely dominated in this game. So the 49ers, they've ran for at least 169 yards in the 5 straight wins that they have over Seattle. So this, again, seems like a very good spot for Mason to do exactly that. He's second in the NFL in rushing. He doesn't get a lot of help for his offensive line. And I think we can all acknowledge that the 49ers offensive line, they've been middling. But Mason does a really good job of creating for his own. You mentioned how effective Tracy was the week before. Jahmyr Gibbs had 14 carries for 78 yards. Like I said, the Seattle's linebackers, they really run out of their gaps. I think this is an area where, like, Mason's speed will kind of show itself. How surprising is it to know that? So Next Gen Stats tracks 15-mile-per-hour rushes. Only one player in the NFL has more 15-mile-per-hour rushes than Mason, and it's Jaden Daniels. Who's like a 4.3 guy. He's super fast. He's going to have an opportunity to break some and to get loose. He finally had a 30-yard run last week, and he had another one where it was really close. So I really do like the matchup for them. So Seattle, like, they don't really allow big plays, but they also don't stop the run well either. So they're 7th worst in what's called stuff percentage. So, like, basically limiting 2-3 yard runs. If you watch that Giants game, like, Tracy's having 6, 7, 8, 6, 6, 7. Like, he has a ton of intermediate yards. So I think, again, just like we talked about with Seattle, if Mason's going to allow the 49ers to live in 3rd and 4 all night, the offense will be in a very good shape.
Yeah, and I kind of hope that's what the 49ers go back to. If you get into those favorable down and distances, you can add in more play action like we're kind of suggesting. I think that could be a recipe for success in this one. And I think because it's on a Thursday night, it's one of those games you kind of just want to go in and get out and, not really do too much. Definitely don't want to have any more injuries. So I think that'd be a good game plan to do that. Now, before we get into score predictions here, just a couple of comments that I wanted to circle back to here. Uncle Saudi says, hope that Purdy stops playing like a young Russell Wilson, running around holding the ball and trying to make the spectacular play, not the smart one. This is actually interesting because I was on a show yesterday with the Seahawks podcaster, and they kind of made that parallel of, it reminds me of Russell Wilson and what he used to do. And I'm like, oh God, okay, that's a good comparison. But yeah, I definitely feel like that's the thin line of, okay, extending plays to help your team versus extending plays and it ends up hurting your team. So like I said, maybe hopefully we see less of the unnecessary extension of plays in this one for Purdy. And another thing is, Purdy hasn't been as careful taking care of the football this year. So Corey asked, what are the odds Purdy throws an interception in this game? In his last 11 games, he has thrown 11 touchdowns and 11 turnovers. That's not great. Do you foresee that improving in this game, or are we expecting or predicting a pick from Purdy in this one?
So usually quarterbacks turn the ball over when there's a lot on their plate, right? Like when they're asked to do more than they're usually asked to do. If we are expecting the game script to go as predicted, the 49ers will be in 3rd and 4. So he won't have to go above and beyond. He won't have to hold the ball and scramble around for 8 seconds. The 49ers will be playing with a lead, barring brain dead turnovers. So if we think that that's the case, then I don't think it'll be an issue. No, I don't see him putting the ball in harm's way, because I think the 49ers are built to their weapons anyway are built to run away from the Seattle's DBs. And I think Mason's going to do a very good job on the ground too. So I don't think it's a game where Purdy's going to put the ball in harm's way.
Now, another aspect to that too is he tends to get a lot of balls batted at the line or either tipped, and that kind of sends it off up in the air for anyone to grab. Now, do you kind of like see that as an issue? Like his balls are just kind of like, too close to the linemen, or is that something he can improve on, or it's just,
I mean,
football?
So it's a quarterback issue. Like tip passes, in my opinion, are a quarterback stat. It's usually the case like last week when he had the tip passes. It's because he's staring the wide receiver down. It's because he's taking an extra pad or an extra hitch instead of just trusting what he sees and let it go. And that's comes back to playing on time. When he plays on time, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. When he reverts back to this sandlot style, that's when we see him make mistakes or just try to do too much, and that's when it comes back to bite him. So again, like if he's playing within the structure of the offense, which is what I expect him to do tomorrow, I think he'll be just fine. We won't really have to worry about these tip passes or the danger ones that go straight up in the air and you're just like, oh no, here we go again.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And Uncle Salty asks, will the Niners finally get an interception tomorrow? It's so surprising when we were talking about the secondary as, being one of the best going into the season, right? Like we had such high hopes. They don't have an interception yet this
Nick
season.
Bosa has more interceptions than all of the defensive backs combined, which is wild to say. Like if you were to say Fred Warner, like sure, that makes sense because teams are stupid and they're going to throw it over the middle and like he makes them pay every time. But if you were to tell me 5 games into the season, Nick Bosa would lead the DBs in interceptions, like no, what are you talking about? Nowhere.
Yeah, so hopefully we do see one in this game. I mean, like we've said, Geno Smith loves to throw the football, so there's going to be opportunities there, I'm sure, a couple, but he's also been accurate with the football. So hopefully don't try to, get in front of it and allow a big play in the process. That wouldn't be smart. But Technic Chic asks, is it the O-line or is it that Mason doesn't have the vision or doesn't trust the O-line rushing lane when it is there? This is interesting because I did see Johnny Dell posted a clip about this saying that like, hey, like it's not so much an issue, or like you're just saying this team misses Christian McCaffrey because Christian McCaffrey probably takes some rushing lanes, probably is a little more patient than, maybe Jordan Mason is. And even Garendo, I think it was Garendo actually in the clip that he showed. And I think Garendo's still learning that aspect of it. But do you feel like it's a vision or not trusting the O-line for these running backs?
Honestly, I think that we've been so spoiled by McCaffrey the last 2 years that those kind of plays stand out. So there's no doubt that there are plays where Mason presses the hole too quickly. He's thinking, hey, this is my 15th carry of the game. I've been getting hit in the backfield on 7 of them. I'm going to get upfield as fast as I can. So like I think if you think of in terms of what he's going through, it makes sense why he might miss a cut or two. But if you watch Mason and then you go watch McCaffrey, like McCaffrey makes no mistakes. Like it is insane how good of a running back or just like player in general he is. So we're basing our comparison off of McCaffrey when it really should just be the league average back, because like that's all Mason needs to be. Like he's an undrafted free agent. Like he's not even supposed to be here right now. So the fact that he has the success that he has kind of speaks to his physical skills. Like he's never really carried the ball at this level. So for him to be getting continuous touches, like it's always going to learn on the fly. So I do understand that like there are plays here and there where he leaves on the field, but you can't ignore the ones where he stiff arms a linebacker into the ground last week and he rushes for 25 yards, or he puts his foot in the ground and he does get 30 yards. So like there's going to be a learning process. And I think the more that he plays, the more he'll get comfortable. But like if the comparison is McCaffrey, because that's all we have to compare him off of, right, over the last couple of years, there's no
That's
doubt he's gonna leave yards on the field.
That's unfair, right? Like just comparing
Right.
anyone to Christian McCaffrey. Yeah, generational player. All right, one last super chat before we get into our score predictions here. Corey says, watching Purdy at Iowa, his early dropped interception luck and turnovers this year, I have always maintained Brock Purdy is interception prone, except for one season in college. He was essentially 1-1 ratio at college. Yeah, I
So
mean,
you also got to think what he had to do at Iowa State too, right? Like they were always trailing. They asked a lot out of their quarterback. It was like him, Brees Hall. Like if they didn't score 30 a game, they were going to probably lose. And when you know that is the case, just like Patrick Mahomes in college, like you're going to start pressing the issue. So like early on here, like we haven't really seen that from Purdy, but he is definitely starting to press, and he's definitely starting to revert to like that. I keep referencing that Sandlot style of play. Like in my opinion, that's not where he's at his best. Like it's great to have mobility as a quarterback, and it's great that he is able to run for first downs, but like Purdy in structure is like top 5, but Purdy outside of structure that's where you get closer to like the 15-20 range. So I do agree there where he just needs to stay within himself. Like trust the people around you. Like there are great players all over the place. Like you don't have to do this. So again, just hey man, play within the structure of the offense.
Yeah, I agree. It's all there for him. All right, so my prediction this week has been 28-24. I do think it's going to be a close one. I think obviously the 49ers are going to put up some points, and I think the Seahawks could keep up, right? Because we talked about Geno Smith throwing the football. He's been playing great. And I still have questions about this defense, right? So 28-24 is my prediction, but I can also see the world where the 49ers lose this game too. I mean, I'm definitely not I'm open-minded, I guess, but I think the 49ers know, they've said it many times, like they know it's not a must-win, but it's as close to a must-win as you can have in a week 6. I hate that they're just saying this like it's not technically a must-win. I've seen like 3-4 different people, including John Lynch, say that, and I'm just like, I don't care about the technicality. Yeah, like, and I don't care about the technicality. That almost feels like a hedge against, like, well, if we lose, we still have a chance. No, you gotta win this game. I don't even want the thought to be in their head that they can lose this one.
So
anyway,
if you lose this game, you drop to 0-3 in the division and 0-4 in the conference. Like you are just nuking all of your tiebreakers moving forward. That cannot happen. So I think we are going to see the best version of this team without McCaffrey, of course. That's possible, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. So I think the score is going to be like crazy high. I think it's going to be like 35-27, something where they're just scoring at will, both sides of the ball. Eventually, the 49ers get a stop, but that'll be the difference in the game. I think both offenses have a lot of success in this game.
Yep. Definitely. They need it as bad as anyone. But all right. Thank you, everyone that tuned in. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. Again, no show tomorrow, not even a post game because I'm going to be traveling. So I'll probably be watching most of this game from the airport / the airplane. So hopefully they give me something to cheer about on my travels. But anyway, thank you guys so much for tuning in. But for now, from me, KP, have a good rest of your Wednesday, folks. Peace.